Have you ever thought that before you could create beautiful artwork that you love, you have to be able to draw perfectly first? But what if something that we consider a shortcut could actually become a tool in our learning process? Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today we're going to discuss the difference between drawing and tracing and what are the benefits of each of these options and why you can consider tracing as an option for you if you're just starting out. Tracing and drawing is something I've sort of changed my mind on over the years. When I first started out, I actually did an art curriculum that really emphasized drawing as the foundation. So I just assumed that's what everyone had to do in order to progress as an artist. And so when I started to teach, that's how I was teaching as well. It was like, okay, well, I guess I just start out with teaching the drawing skills, and some of the lessons that I did as a young person were a little bit mundane, a little bit, you might even say maybe boring, maybe it was just my attitude. But I found that some of the time I was not inspired as I was learning to draw, and I was also seeing that with my students, we could kind of get just stuck in a rut of just drawing and working with graphite, which some people love, but other people really enjoy color, right? We want to start creating masterpieces as soon as possible. Then as a young adult, I attended an art class where we were tracing everything and then focusing on whatever the medium was. So watercolor pencil or colored pencil. We just focused on that particular medium and the techniques involved in that medium and the color theory and the values. And we actually didn't do any drawing at all. And that turned out to be rather time efficient because, you're not taking all that time every class to draw things out. And there was another student in one of the classes I attended who had beautiful work. And somehow the topic of conversation came up where she said, well, I don't know how to draw. And I thought, you don't know how to draw? Like, I just assumed to create work like she was creating, she obviously had to draw. And the teacher was kind of, well, yeah, no, drawing and doing these other mediums are kind of, they're different techniques. And I was like, okay, that's true. And so I started to incorporate that into my own teaching where sometimes we would do drawing lessons that were specifically focused on drawing, and then other times we would just trace an image and move on with whatever it was we wanted to learn, whether it was that medium or technique, whatever. And I found that the students really enjoyed that because they were able to get beautiful pieces of art a lot faster, and they were learning a ton at the same time. It was not like they were shortcutting the learning process. They were actually learning, but they were learning more skills and kind of growing their skills. In some ways, I almost see some of the drawing skills and art skills as like a flower opening, and different petals have different purposes, right? And so you can have drawing, which is not just a foundation, it's almost like one of the petals, and then technique is a petal, and you could say color theory and understanding color and understanding value. Those kind of all work together and they can unfold, sort of in tandem with each other, and you don't have to have one and then the other and then the other in order to be able to learn to create successful art. And as I started to transition my thinking on this, the lessons became more fresh and fun, and we could create just a variety of different things depending on what the students' interests were and what their strengths and their gifts were. And one student said to me, I think that doing this method of tracing is actually better than being stuck with having to draw everything, because she said, by tracing, I get my proportions right and I get the shapes right. And then when I'm done, the piece looks very professional compared to artists who really force themselves into having to draw. But because their drawing wasn't quite on, it kind of threw the whole piece off and it looked amateur, even though they had put a lot of work and maybe they had skills in color or value and technique. The drawing was what threw things. And so I realized just how beneficial tracing actually can be in the beginning stages of your art journey, or even anywhere along the way, depending on what your strength is and what you want to focus on as an artist. And now with all that to say, I'm not downplaying drawing. I really believe in it. I teach it and I still love to draw myself. And I do think it has so much value for us as artists. I really think that we should include drawing as a part of our journey. I just don't think it has to be the only thing we do before we can build on to other areas of art. For instance, one of the first lessons I do now when a new student comes to me is actually one that's just focused on value and understanding light and shadow. And it is a fun project, and most students come away with huge success, even children, and it's just a really fun thing to get started with. I think it always amazes them to see what incredible results they get the very first day they take lessons. Or there was me as a young student when I was starting out, and I always loved color for as long back as I can remember. I enjoyed mixing color, and so when I was doing drawing lessons, I found it so hard to just stick with graphite and not having color, and I think it's a great skill to have and a great interest to have, but I found it hard to not have more color in the mix. And so I think having lessons where you aren't even thinking about the drawing, but just focusing on color can just add some variety, or maybe if that's your interest or your strength is color, then it allows you to kind of really zero in on that area for a while and enjoy the aspects of art making that color brings. And then of course, technique is one of those things that it builds throughout the mediums. And so I think you can be learning technique as you're drawing, but you can also be learning technique as you are working on any media, and that will transfer from one medium to another, from wet to dry, and vice versa. And so you really don't have to master techniques in one medium in order to try another one, or in order to start painting instead of just drawing. And so yes, tracing allows you to work on those other aspects of art, as I mentioned, the value, the color, the technique, and just then drawing just becomes one of those petals, if you will, that helps you to blossom as an artist. The second reason I think tracing is so helpful is that it allows you to learn what shapes actually matter when you are drawing. Because when you look at something, a photo that's got a lot of detail, it can be overwhelming to go, okay, well, what do I need to draw? What matters? What doesn't? And when you trace, you kind of get an idea of, okay, what am I looking for? What are the big shapes that I need? And then what little things can I just kind of add in as I'm working on my technique, and what things can I eliminate altogether? So it can kind of help break down the overwhelm, because you're just learning to simplify by tracing. And one way to look at it is kind of like you're just wanting the outline, almost like if you were making a very simple coloring book. And all those other details can come into place as you just build up the painting with your paint and your pencils, whatever medium you're working in. And that kind of segues into drawing as part of your tracing process. If you've already traced your image and then there's some small details that you realize, oh, I missed, or maybe you want to add those details in, you can draw them in, but you've got such a good foundation there that it's way easier to draw those few little shapes. And those, guess what? You're still learning to draw. Take, for instance, this bird we're going to be tracing together. You can see, if you look up closely, I have not managed to trace every single detail with my red pencil, but the pencil details that I do have there are going to be sufficient for what I need for the project. And I'm also going to be able to draw in just a few other shapes as I go. And so, as you can see, you can still gain drawing skills as you are tracing. Another benefit of tracing is just the instant gratification and confidence boost it can give you, because you get some beautiful artwork that you would not have realized you were even capable of doing. But when you're finished, you're so thrilled with it. And it kind of just gives you that extra motivation to keep going and try something new and experiment, and eventually even build more drawing skills, because you can see how much you are able to actually do. And that's not as hard as you think. And as my student said, you'll be happier with the final product because everything is working together, the big shapes are working, and so all the little details just kind of fall into place, which lets you focus on your strengths and strengthen those. And then when you're ready, you can work on the areas that you feel are weaker, and you can build up your skills in the way that works the best for you and your interests, your gifts, your time, and it can make the whole process a lot more smooth and more enjoyable. But I will give my little disclaimer, because I still love drawing and I don't want to knock drawing. I think it still has a valuable place, and so I'm just going to share why I love drawing and why you would want to consider still adding it to your list of skills, because you might be going, well, I'm never going to need to draw. And if you never really want to, you don't have to. But I honestly think it has a lot of value. So I'll tell you why I think it has value. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the whole topic. Do you think drawing is something that every artist needs to learn at the beginning? Did you learn to draw at the very beginning, or did you kind of learn to draw as you went? Did you trace? I'd be curious to know, what is your personal experience with the whole drawing versus tracing thing? Now, as I said, I had a foundation in drawing at a fairly young age, and I did a curriculum, so it was a little bit more of a structured approach to drawing, as much as I will say at the time, as being a younger student, not as interested in just drawing. And I think in a lot of ways it taught me just to be focused and consistent and disciplined in the way I approach my work. I don't always have to feel inspired to sit down and draw. And that was definitely the case when I was young and doing this particular curriculum. Like anything in life, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And so I do think that having that practice at a younger age was really, really helpful for me. And so now when I work, I actually do prefer to do my own drawings before I paint. If I'm just working on my own, I do find it helps me just kind of get familiar with the subject matter that I'm working with, as well as maybe find any problems that I might run into while I'm painting. So I do find that the drawing process can be really, really helpful. It's kind of like a preliminary step for me, and I start to kind of process what I'm doing. It also is a good time if you want to play with the composition and change things in the composition, you can do that. And you can take artistic license. And the reason you can take artistic license with a drawing background is that you start, when you draw, especially when you draw from life, but even if you're working from a photo, you start to build your visual memory. You can build your visual memory, I think, any way you're doing art, even if you're always just tracing and working from a photo. But there's something to be said about building your visual memory when you're actually doing the drawing and you're looking at something in front of you. And so it kind of just allows you then, if you decide, you know what, I want to make some adjustments. For instance, you've drawn hundreds of leaves before. And so because you've drawn so many leaves, maybe from life or from photos, all of a sudden when you need to kind of change a leaf or add a leaf or whatever, it's a lot easier than if you've never really done a realistic leaf. Then you really have to look at a photo to figure out what you're going to do. And so drawing from life and drawing in general definitely can build your visual memory, and building your visual memory allows you to either just work from imagination because you've built those images into your mind by repetition, but it also allows you to tweak an image, like a photo. If you're using a photo that isn't quite what you're after, you can change it because you've already got some images almost like implanted in your mind just from all the times you've done, say, a leaf before. And so some of that visual memory, you'll only build it in the areas where you do a lot of practice. For instance, I don't do a lot of animals. I have done animals in classes with students because almost all my students love animals. So I've done a lot more animals than I would have chosen myself. But when I'm painting on my own, I'm just drawn flowers. And so I've done a lot of flowers. And so I would say that's where I have more of my visual memory built up. I've got some built up in the area of doing animals, but I wouldn't say that's my strong point. And so also keep that in mind. If you're like, well, I can draw this really well from memory and this I can't so much. It really can depend on what you have drawn from life or from photos in the past. And that's what helps build your memory. But anyways, all that to say that yes, drawing helps you build your visual memory, and building your visual memory will allow you to make changes and make adjustments in your work as you go and take artistic license, as we call it. The other benefit of drawing is a lot of the times when we draw, we're also focusing on value and light and shadows, right? We're not just focusing on the main shapes. And so you do get to understand values more as you draw. So drawing and value studies can really go hand in hand. And I think understanding value can be really, really helpful as you dive into working with any medium. Of course, you can just do value studies in the medium of your choice by tracing. So it's not like essential, but drawing classes include studying value as well. And honestly, drawing can be a rewarding project on its own. Graphite pieces can be absolutely beautiful. Some people only like working in graphite. And so it really is a medium in its own right. And so I think graphite drawing is actually just a beautiful medium as it is. And because drawing is kind of a low commitment or low-key medium to work with, that you don't have to pull out a whole pile of supplies, it doesn't involve a lot of cleanup, it can be one of those things that's very easy to just pick up and put down or do a small 15-minute sketch a day. I think it's a really great way to gain just that consistency in your art practice, which is so essential for really growth. So much in life, really, we know that, right, involves just consistent practice, and art is no different. And so I think drawing is a way that is very easy to be consistent with it because it is so simple to just have a sketchbook and a pencil and just pull it out and work on it anywhere, anytime. And so I would say that is another benefit to being able to draw. Now, I don't know if this is just me, but I find when I have drawn something myself, it just feels a little bit more personal. I don't know if that's just weird, but I find that's true for me. I don't know if that's everyone would say the same thing, or if that's just a personal thing. Everyone would feel different about that, but I definitely kind of feel that way myself, and maybe that's something I have to still work through because there's a time and a place for tracing that would save time. So I would be interested to hear your thoughts on this whole topic, and I'd also love to know what your background is. Do you have a foundation in drawing? Do you really just focus on working in a medium? Have you taken classes where you've done a trace first and then just worked on the techniques and the medium at hand? I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this, and I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. And in the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!